Uruguay will melt down a Bronze Eagle found on a sunken World War II-era German destroyer off its coast 13 years ago.
For all these years, a pristine Nazi cruiser has lain dormant beneath the weight of the Atlantic, keeping a secret from the world. Until now. What salvage divers found within its deteriorating shell was much more unsettling than rusty steel or long-lost weaponry. A shocking and unexpected finding that caused shockwaves across whole nations. However, fresh information is emerging, and it challenges our previous assumptions. The typical mental image of World War II has tanks chugging across Europe or fighter jets swooping down from the sky. Separately, on the open sea, a darker and more perilous form of conflict was taking place. The Nazi German Navy was the nerve center of the conflict. It was created to flout international treaties, breach the norms, and subtly suffocate the Allies. Delving into the world it sprang from is the first step towards comprehending this peculiar and tragic tale. One of the most aggressive naval strategies in modern history may be seen in the activities of the German Navy during World War II. The Kriegsmarine was the official name. Officially, they had to adhere to stringent regulations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed limits on the size and power of their ships. Yet, Hitler's group had other intentions. They were daring and reckless in their refusal to play by the rules. Admiral Graf Spee exemplified this to an excellent degree. She was referred to as a pocket battleship because, to her ingenious design, which allowed her to circumvent the treaty's weight restriction of 10,000 tons. She was surprisingly quick for her size, reaching speeds of over 28 knots. This gave her the ability to outpace many adversaries even when the going became tough, making her a formidable menace to opposing cruisers. The ship is referred to as she for a reason, and that's not an oversight. Ships have always been called female in nautical tradition. The belief holds that this is due to the fact that sailors were utterly reliant on their ships, much like a child on a parent's hug. That the term ship was originally a feminine noun in older languages is another possible explanation. Whatever the case may be, many people continue to follow the old ways even now. Bismarck and Tirpitz were among the heavyweights. Nothing was hidden from them. With 8 enormous 15-inch cannons, each of these behemoths weighed more than 40,000 tons. They resembled floating fortresses due to the heavy armor that encased them. Dominating the seas and terrifying the Allied fleets was their task. That is precisely what they did for a period of time. There was a downside to their size as well. It became much simpler to detect and attack these large ships from above with the development of radar, improved reconnaissance planes, and stronger Allied cooperation. Although they caused quite a stir, their massive bulk ultimately betrayed them. Underwater operations were Germany's true secret weapon, even though the large surface ships garnered much of the attention. That's when the U-boats entered the picture. Whether they were targeting civilian or military ships, these submarines were like sharks in the Atlantic. Coastal patrols were handled by smaller variants such as the Type 2 in the early stages of the conflict. The Type 7, however, proved to be the fleet's true workhorse. They were constructed to a total of nearly 700 before the war ended. Although they were not the most impressive or quick, they were sufficient. The Allies had a field day with their torpedoes, deck guns, and ability to scuttle under the waves undetected. Admiral Karl Dönitz was the brains behind the U-boat operation. His notorious wolf pack tactic was forming groups of U-boats to jointly ambush Allied convoys, typically at night. These coordinated attacks were quite violent. By 1942, the U-boats had sunk Allied ships worth millions of tons, and their use of encrypted Enigma codes for communication only added insult to injury. British supply lines were precariously balanced for some time. The situation, however, began to change. The Allies' breakthrough in deciphering the Enigma codes, together with enhanced radar, long-range patrol planes, and convoy tactics, caused the U-boats to suffer significant casualties. In May 1943, a month commonly referred to as Black May, Germany's submarine supremacy started to crumble. Although Allied shipping losses decreased, the sinking of U-boats increased dramatically. German efforts to deploy innovative technology, such as the snorkel and the sophisticated Type WW2 electroboot, were ultimately unsuccessful. In the end, Nazi Germany's naval might came from a combination of showy surface ships and covert submarines that attacked Allied supply lines in different ways. Despite the menacing appearance of the great warships, the secret conflict taking on under the waves almost turned the tide. The German fleet was unable to stay up with the changing tide of technology and tactics as the Allies eventually adapted. Before we can get into the disturbing findings of the salvage divers, we must first learn about the ship and its fascinating history of sinking to the ocean below. This battleship didn't just go under, it transformed into a specter the second it hit the water, one that has lingered in the shadows of maritime history for many years. One of the so-called pocket battleships that Nazi Germany launched in 1934 was the Admiral Graf Spee. Though she paled in comparison to full-sized battleships, her formidable arsenal was more than adequate to wreak havoc. Navigating the South Atlantic in search of Allied commercial ships was her task. She was fast, armed heavily, and designed for long-range operations. A bit too much attention was paid to her towards the end of 1939. 3 British cruisers located her near the River Plate on December 13, 1939, by following a smoke plume that she sent out. Captain Hans Langsdorff led his ship into the neutral port of Montevideo, Uruguay, since they were outnumbered and their ammunition was running low. There was a need for time for the crew to fix the ship and reorganize because of the damage. However, pressure from around the world quickly intensified. The British ensured that Uruguay would not let her to remain for an extended period through diplomatic channels. Following a series of anxious days, Captain Langsdorff was forced to face a difficult decision. He had ensured the crew's safety by removing them from the ship in a safe manner and making arrangements for their journey to Argentina. However, after the smoke cleared, he felt the crushing burden of losing his ship. He was left with just 2 options at that moment. A possible option was to attempt a river crossing to Buenos Aires. However, the British had conjured up the idea that further vessels were congregating beyond the horizon in order to capture him. Regardless of the nature of the enemy's tactics, Langsdorff was unwilling to put his troops in danger during an escape that may escalate into a massacre. As an alternative, he might personally demolish the Graf Spee, rendering it useless in the face of German aggression. He decided to drown her. Though it spared his crew's lives, the choice broke him emotionally. Admiral Graf Spee was repositioned a few miles offshore on December 17, 1939, as the twilight light began to fade. All across the ship, the crew detonated bombs. The blasts tore the hull apart as they went off, and the resulting fires swiftly ate away at what little was remained. At last, the massive battleship plummeted to her death in the 11-meter-deep River Plate. The ship's deck collapsed, the stern split apart, and the lofty mast sank to the ground in a muck. After the ship had sunk and his crew had been saved, Langsdorff felt he had accomplished all he could. He believed that a captain's destiny was inseparably linked to that of his ship. "I came to the terrible choice to sink the Graf Spee to save her from getting into enemy hands," he stated in a letter to his loved ones and superiors. "There was no way to escape to open sea with the ammo we had left. As a result, I chose to live with the fallout." The captain's personal destiny is inextricably bound up with the ship's. He said, "I can do no more for my ship's company. I am fully content to pay with my life for any possible discredit on the honor of the flag." In his last remarks, he stated that the only way to maintain the honor of the German flag was by his own death. Inside a plain Buenos Aires hotel room, Langsdorff made his last move in the wee hours of December 20th, 1939. With the battle pennant of the ship spread out under him, he drew his service revolver, and so his tale came to a tragic end. Drama and spectacle weren't the points. Until the very end, he saw himself faithfully following his ship. The world could never forget her, even in the lowest depths. Even after all these years, you could see the ship's remains sticking out of the ocean. Located miles under the waves, it wasn't some faraway, inaccessible ruin. This particular one was positioned just off the shore of a bustling major city. Shipping companies had to be very careful as they sailed around her. Possible dangers were a source of concern for harbor authorities. Historians, too? A time capsule in mid-air caught their eye. Among the ship's wreckage were pieces of radar, rangefinders, and an unfinished emblem. The plot, however, takes an unexpected twist at this point. An engineering company situated in Montevideo, Uruguay, unexpectedly bought the salvage rights to the Graf Spee for £14,000 just months after the ship went down in 1940. Despite how simple it seems, that was everything but. The truth was known to British intelligence. British intelligence agents serving under the Admiralty set up this local firm as a cover operation. The British were keen in discovering what was within that wreck, and they were determined to prevent anyone else from reaching there before them. Nevertheless, what gave it their undivided attention? See, they didn't value Graf Spee for its steel or guns. It was the ship's state-of-the-art radar rangefinder that piqued their interest. In an effort to better their own radar systems, the British were interested in studying the technology. In order to ensure that no one would detect their true objective, they clandestinely coordinated for experts to investigate the wreck. They may have even contributed to the development of more effective Allied radar systems with some of the information they gathered. Even after all these years, the wreckage hadn't finished its tale. Rusted bones of the Admiral Graf Spee slowly faded into folklore as it remained silently beneath the river plate for years. The sight was familiar to Montevideo locals. As the tide receded on some days, the steel hull would occasionally rise from the ocean like a ghostly apparition. As they told tales to children with wide eyes, fishermen would point to it. Even tourists would rent even little boats and go around the ruins of the Nazi battleship. But what was under the surface remained a mystery to everybody. The majority of onlookers initially assumed it was just a sinking wreck. Whatever secrets the spacecraft may have contained likely perished along with it after the battle ended and the ship was destroyed. Rumors, however, began to pass. Some speculated that the crew may have forgotten something valuable when they sank the ship in 1939, such as riches, secret documents, or even experimental weaponry. Over time, the Graf Spee became more than just a wreck, thanks to the theories that fueled the mystery. At the river's base, it transformed into a tale, a mystery. The early 2000s was the turning point when interest became action. Uruguay authorized a group of private investors from the US and Europe to remove ship pieces. However, rescuing a huge cruiser from the mire would not be a picnic. Danger lurked in the form of unpredictability in the water currents, an unstable riverbank, and the presence of unexploded weaponry. Things went wrong with their initial major effort. The ship's rangefinder, weighing 27 tons, plummeted down into the mud like a stone when one of the strong steel cables snapped while attempting to raise it. That was a possible ending. However, the squad persisted. The telemeter, which had previously assisted in aiming the ship's enormous cannons, was ultimately raised in 2004 after much trial and error. Recovering anything substantial from the disaster was a major accomplishment at the time. The next big thing was the revelation that everyone was talking about. A huge bronze eagle, over 7 feet wide and holding a Nazi insignia in its talons, was retrieved by the divers in 2006. The artwork, which weighed 360 kilograms, had formerly graced the stern of the Graf Spee with great pride. It was like unearthing a fragment of WW2 when you brought it to the surface. The word of the recovery traveled quickly across the world, not only in Uruguay. Impressive interest was immediately expressed by museums and individual collectors. Everyone was watching, including the German government. The introduction of such a sign, however, was met with predictable criticism. Neo-Nazi organizations' attempts to get the eagle were a source of concern for others. In the minds of some, the possibility of its eventual disappearance into private collections was a real concern. A complex argument was sparked by the act of retrieving the eagle from the river. Uruguay was smack dab in the thick of everything. What on earth are they to do with this historically significant artifact? Some thought it would be more fitting in a museum, where it could keep people's memories alive. Some thought it would be giving extremists a boost if it was on display. A more fundamental concern began to emerge as events unfolded. Why had the remaining portion of the Graf Spee never been thoroughly investigated? The ship may still be an unofficial war cemetery, according to some. Others thought the plane may have secret compartments that held delicate or expensive items. Authorities may have been extra careful throughout the salvage procedure in order to safeguard valuable artifacts, according to certain theories. The rumors and hypotheses started to circulate at this point. Some said that, out of concern for what may come to light, the German government had subtly urged Uruguay to not go too far. Some divers said that they had been told not to enter locked compartments they had discovered on prior dives. For many, the eagle's safe return signaled the discovery of other mysteries concealed inside the wreckage. A number of groups, including governments, treasure seekers, and historians, persisted in circling the area, each with their own agenda. While private corporations recognized financial opportunities, scholars advocated for thorough research and preservation. Protecting its own interests while maintaining a balanced foreign diplomacy was Uruguay's goal. German authorities also voiced their concern, urging visitors to treat the place with dignity. A complicated tug-of-war ensued as a result of the entire circumstance. Even though it had been submerged since 2006, the Graf Spee was no longer only a battleship. Entangled in political disputes, legal battles, and ethical dilemmas, it had become a symbol of history's unfinished business. The Bronze Eagle had transformed from a mere metal object into a key that had revealed a greater enigma. The most pressing question that had still to be resolved was, what else may be hidden behind the layers of dirt and quiet that had built up over the years? However, one artifact recovered from the wreckage of the Graf Spee caused a raging inferno on dry land, even as the ship itself lay serenely beneath the water. A seemingly innocuous salvage operation sparked a heated national debate, forcing people to confront their nation's deepest secrets and confronting their own history of intolerance. Salvage workers in 2006 didn't anticipate being embroiled in one of the most contentious disputes in Uruguay's recent history when they retrieved the 360-kilogram Bronze Eagle from the ocean. Not only was it an artifact from a Nazi warship that had sunk, but it was also a tangible symbol of the worst era in human history. What to do with it was now Uruguay's problem. The initial strategy was straightforward. For a short time, the eagle was on exhibit as a relic from the past. Visitors might take in the history, discover more about the Graf Spee, and contemplate their place in it. However, worries began to emerge shortly thereafter. Displaying a Nazi sign, even inadvertently, was seen by many as a way to draw the attention of extremists, or worse, to honor its meaning. In reaction, the authorities concealed it in a Navy storage and removed it from public view. It remained there for a long time. However, things become considerably more intricate in 2019. The salvage firm and the Uruguayan government will split the proceeds from the auction of the eagle, according to a court decision. A worldwide uproar ensued as a result of that choice. Many people voiced their worries, including Jewish groups, historians, and even the German government. What if collectors with nefarious intentions or white nationalists attempted to purchase it? How would that be perceived? The deal was ultimately scrapped due to the overwhelming negative response. The Supreme Court of Uruguay then declared the eagle to be state property in 2021. However, the discussion continued. A daring and surprising plan was put up by President Luis Lacalle Pou in 2023 in an attempt to resolve the issue. He proposed melting the eagle down and transforming it into a peace dove, instead of either selling it or maintaining it in its current state. The concept was symbolic, turning a hate sign into a unity and hope symbol. Pablo Achugari, a renowned artist from Uruguay, was even enlisted to oversee the makeover. The concept had several early backers, including some prominent Jews. The backing, however, was short-lived. The idea's detractors were vocal as it received media attention throughout the world. A historian named Diego Del Grossi said it was highly disrespectful and like turning Auschwitz into a nude camp, an attempt to whitewash sad history. Anibal Glutowski, a former legislator, also made such analogy. Eradicating eagle artifacts, according to writer Mercedes Vigil, is the same as eradicating collective history. There wouldn't be much of history to draw on, she said, if everyone did what she said. How polarized the response had grown became apparent to the president in no time at all. If one wants to generate peace, the first thing one has to do is generate unity, and clearly this has not been done. He later abandoned the idea formally after admitting this in a news conference. Even outside of Uruguay, the debate spread. The discussion prompted more contemplation throughout the area, notably in Argentina, which is directly neighboring. It was even essential to modify such a rare relic, according to Jonathan Karzenbaum of the Buenos Aires Holocaust Museum. Even while art may communicate ideas, he said, some things should be put so that others can learn from them. Carlos Mazlatin, an Argentine lawyer, proposed an alternative strategy, moving the eagle to Jerusalem and inscribed it with a strong statement denouncing Nazism and praising Zionism. Instead of trying to change the past, he proposed facing it head-on. There was also input from international organizations. A private sale of the eagle, according to the Simon Wiesenthal Center, may make it a prize for radicals, hence Uruguay should keep it in a museum. The German government eventually changed its mind about showcasing Nazi relics. According to officials, the eagle could be used to educate the perils of fascism and hate as long as it was presented in a cautious and educational setting. In the midst of it all, the Supreme Court of Uruguay maintained its position. The eagle would continue to be officially owned by the government and kept in that naval storehouse, invisible to the public. Even now, it remains, hidden from view, but certainly not forgotten. More than just a submerged artifact, the bronze eagle came to represent the difficulty and awkwardness of confronting the past. Is it your practice to bury hurtful symbols under layers of concealment? Or do you face them head-on, learn from them, and then utilize what you've learned to help others from making the same mistakes? Uruguay is still grappling with the problem. The eagle is now peacefully stored. However, every once in a while the discussion starts up again. showing that even long-forgotten parts of history may come back to the surface when people aren't ready to let go of them. The telemeter and eagle may have been the most prominent artifacts recovered after the crash, but they certainly weren't the only ones. The mysterious afterlife of the Graf Spee is further complicated by some of the secretly discovered artifacts. The underwater legacy of the Graf Spee extends much beyond the eagle and that enormous rangefinder, contrary to popular belief. Divers, historians, and inquisitive explorers have unearthed a wide variety of artifacts from the river plate's murky depths throughout the years. Despite their little size, each one contributes much to our understanding of the last days spent on board the pocket battleship. Among the most striking discoveries occurred in 1997, a full decade before the spotlight was shown on the infamous Nazi Eagle. The salvage team dug up a 15-centimeter monster that had been the ship's secondary cannon barrel and had discharged in combat. It is still on display outside of Montevideo's Naval Museum. Rust and time have worn it down, yet the way it extends towards the sky is almost breathtaking. Locals go by it like it's an old neighbor who's lived there forever, but tourists stop to snap photographs. Not anything of significant size emerged from the water unscathed. Some of the ship's smaller deck guns and parts of its telegraph system were also recovered by recovery teams in the years after the gun barrel's rescue. While these may not seem thrilling, they were actually the meat and potatoes of naval combat. The telegraphs were essential for the transmission of commands from the bridge to the engine room and the gunners. Some of these artifacts have found their way into local museums, where inquisitive minds may examine them in detail. Some went into private collections, where they were subtly passed down through generations. Despite their lack of fame, they provide testimony to the ship's routine in the late 1930s. The anchor is another consideration. Additionally, near Montevideo's shoreline, you can see one of the enormous anchors that Graf Spee had retrieved. It is very impossible to overlook. Seated atop a sturdy platform with inscriptions narrating its history, this enormous piece of metal has become something of a landmark. Thinking about it, it's an appropriate symbol. Something that was once used to secure a battleship is now serving as a reminder, tying the ship's memories to the spot where she met her demise. However, not all artifacts are massive and weighty like anchors or cannon barrels. Countless smaller fragments have also been found. Metal fittings, naval plates, pieces of ventilation grates, and other gear that may have previously been used to support the ship are among the numerous minor artifacts that have been discovered. In museums and private collections around Latin America, many of these have gone unnoticed. Some may not give much thought to a twisted metal rod or a weathered plate at first sight. However, as you begin to assemble them together, they reveal a narrative about the construction, operation, and eventual demise of this magnificent vessel. Engineers and historians were particularly enthralled with the ship's optical apparatus. The Graf Spee was able to target her cannons with lethal accuracy because to these technologies. Subsequent salvage operations succeeded in retrieving rangefinder gear, lenses, cabling, and even a few vintage light bulbs, among other optical components. Despite their little size, these parts were vital in providing the ship with an advantage in combat. Museums in Montevideo have restored some of the equipment and now showcase it behind glass. This gives tourists a chance to see firsthand the advanced targeting technology that was available long before computers took over. Big and little, all these artifacts have a purpose beyond just being displayed at a museum. The Graf Spee's material world is being restored by their combined efforts. They assist in conceptualizing the experience of the officers and crew members who resided on board, engaged in combat alongside her, and then deserted her during those anxious last moments. With each bolt, plate, and lens that has been retrieved from the wreck, we are able to draw closer to a world that has passed nearly a century ago. Even with all these artifacts found, there's still a sense that the ship is hiding something. It seems that with every new artifact unearthed from the river plate's murky depths, more and more questions regarding what could still be waiting for us there are raised. Who knows? Maybe the long-awaited breakthrough will arrive in 2025. Not much has come to light officially as yet, but word on the street is that fresh expeditions are making plans to return to the site of the Graf Spee's burial. Researchers are hopeful that there may be unexplored sealed chambers that have been dormant since 1939, thanks to cutting-edge technology like deep-water drones, precise robots, and improved sonar imaging. Experts secretly speculate that layers of silt may conceal undetected personal belongings, secret storage areas, or secret Navy records. Then there's the matter of the hidden Nazi cargo, the stuff that keeps treasure seekers up at night. Is it gold? Communicating with delicate devices? Missing plans? There are unconfirmed reports that the crew purposefully left behind encrypted materials or experimental technology when they destroyed the ship. Additionally, historians are keeping their fingers crossed that the last hours of the Graf Spee can finally be solved. Before he ordered the scuttling, did Captain Langsdorff conceal anything? Were unidentified, last-minute directives from Berlin carried out? Historiographers' references to orders from Berlin refer to the clandestine directives emanating from Hitler's inner circle in the German capital. Berlin was the war machine's master controller. At this point, everything is conjectural. But when our technology digs further into the wreckage of the Graf Spee, it's possible that it still has some mysteries to reveal. Our knowledge of Nazi Germany's shady dealings grows with each artifact that is unearthed. Will we ever learn the whole truth of the Graf Spee, or will it remain hidden for all time? Leave a comment with your ideas. Please support our channel by subscribing, like, and sharing videos. If you want to see more videos like this, just swipe to the next one.